TV party tonight. Alright! We're gonna have a TV party, alright! Tonight! We've got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Everybody's gonna hang out here tonight! Alright! We'll pass out on the couch. Alright! Tonight! We've got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Don't talk about anything else. We don't want to know. We're dedicated to our favorite shows.
And tonight, our favorite show is Voltron, Legendary Defender, Season 7, brought to you by the good people at Netflix. I don't know who else is a part of this. Who else is responsible for Voltron? But let's just go with that. Brought to you by the good people at Netflix. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich, and here to talk a little Voltron with me, as he's done for the last couple of seasons, is Mr. Robert Winfre, the host of the 411 Ground and Pound radio show, and, whether he likes it or not, the Damn You Hollywood Movie Review show. Hello, sir. How are you?
All right, Mark, I got to tell you, I was utterly unprepared for this show, so instead, you can talk about the television show. I'll be giving you live updates on the midterm elections that are taking place here in the United States.
I know you told me you're doing a bit, but I honestly would rather talk about the election now. There's a couple of really close late races here in Florida, and don't tempt me. I could talk about that all night.
Apparently DeSantis is pulling away.
Is he? In the hopes that my father would give me money, I voted mostly Democrat this time around.
That was a terrible decision on your part.
Oh, I like the guy running for governor, Gillum.
Oh, how could you tolerate that guy?
I don't have enough information to answer that educatedly. Is that a word?
It just wonderfully undermines your point.
I don't have enough information to answer that with any authority, but what I have read about the guy I do like. So,
yeah, fair enough. You're part of the blue.
Part of the blue
puddle?
wave.
Puddle. It's a puddle. There's no wave.
I don't know how close are the Democrats to actually getting the 2 seats they need to claim Congress?
I don't know. They'll probably get a technical majority in the House. I doubt they're taking back the Senate at this point.
That's going to make a lot of people very upset tomorrow morning.
I don't actually care.
I will tell you this, as I've said before, for anyone who has
look, here's my thing about... sorry, just let me say this.
Thanks, Jeff.
Get it out of the way. Let me say this, I'll get it out of the way, then I will let you finish your point. I won't keep talking over you while you try to make your point. Just hang on. I fully expect the Democrats to get a technical majority in the House. The Senate will remain basically the same, because that's traditionally what happens. Whatever party has the White House tends to lose one of the houses of Congress in the midterms. That's just what happens historically, and quite frankly, despite me largely being a conservative individual, a mashup of conservative libertarian, I'm okay with it. This doesn't bother me one way or the other.
Yeah, I largely agree with that point, but let me go ahead and say this. Where I was going was, for those people who are like my old friend Jason from high school, who decided that he was walking in the streets one day and woke up and realized that everything had gone to hell simply because Donald Trump had been elected president. I hate to tell these people he's going to be reelected. For those that follow me on Facebook, there's a reason why, and I don't really have a dog in the hunt one way or the other. In that I'm actively rooting for the guy or rooting against the guy. It's not really about that. It's about it's about wanting the country to do well. And I don't think, and we talked about this on the election coverage.
Our election special, which was hilarious, by the way.
which
I
is
maintain
the president has so little control over where the country goes because of the design of the country and just the way life works. But but there's a reason why let me get this out there and then I'll pitch back to you. There's a reason why on my Facebook page I retweet a lot of stuff from like Yahoo Finance and CNN Money, institutions that pretty solidly have evidence to back up whatever it is they're reporting about financial news. And all of the financial news is pointing in the positive. Whether or not everybody is benefiting from that is a whole other debate. But when the numbers are positive, the president tends to stay in power. So he's not getting voted out.
I mean, look, this may be somewhat irrelevant given the demographics at play, but under Trump, the black unemployment rate is the lowest it's ever been. Like, ever.
Right. And neither one of us is saying that that's because of Donald Trump. A lot of the trends that happen in the country were established well before any one. So here's an example of this: Bill Clinton benefited from the trends that were set in the country before he was elected, but they started to take effect during his presidency. So he gets credit for the country being in better shape than it was during the first Bush administration.
Even though he had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Barack Obama
was a violent rapist.
Yes, Bill Clinton was a
violent rapist.
Bill Clinton is a rapist. A lot of people wrongly associated the economic downturn to he hadn't even been elected yet, Barack Obama, because of the trends that were.
I mean, look, I don't like the way he handled it, but the crash was not his fault.
Right. He hadn't even been elected president yet.
I mean, again, his handling of it, that's 100% on him. But the fact that it happened, he was just the guy in the office at the time.
Right.
He gets neither credit nor... he gets no positive or negative credit for being in that place when that happened. So
this is sort of Trump playing Bill Clinton here. He happens to have been president during an economic upturn. Job creation and so on and so forth. So basically, what I'm saying is, for all the people who want him voted out of office because of social reasons or racial reasons or whatever the reasons are, the country's doing too well for people to turn on him now. That doesn't mean he won't lose Congress. He may very well, and that's probably a good thing. Checks and balances and all of that. Hey, want to talk Voltron now?
The last thing I want to say to anyone who just kind of woke up and thought that the country went to hell because Donald Trump was elected president, this is like the frog in the boiling water. You are now the frog who looks around and go, "Oh, I'm dead." Trust me, this is not Trump's. I'm not a big fan of Trump necessarily, but let's not pretend that the water hasn't been heating up for essentially, our entire lifetimes. You just didn't want to pay attention to it.
All right, so...
And in fairness, neither did I, so... All right, with politics essentially out of the way for the moment.
Yes. Thank you for tuning into the Whiskey Rebellion. All right. So Voltron...
Let's talk about the Lion Rebellion.
Yes. So Voltron 5 and 6 was ultimately about Lotor and the Lion sort of joining forces, and Lotor slowly unveiling his nefarious plot. He wasn't for the Galra Empire, he was for the Lotor Empire. He wanted to create something of his own. And by the end of Season 6, he does just that. He basically creates a new quintessence weapon, much like Voltron. And that weapon and Voltron have a fight to the death in the Voltron's version of the negative zone. They end up defeating Lotor, but it cost them the Castle of Lions, and so they are stuck out in deep space with dead lions and no castle as we go into Season 7. Season 7 is also, as alluded to in Season 6, Season 7 is the voyage home to Earth. What they with Lotor dealt with, they realized that it's only a matter of time, I think, before the Galra, and there might have been another reason for this, but the Galra are going to attack the Earth. If I'm reading this correctly. As the Paladins decide what to do next, Pidge reveals that a copy of the plans for the castle ship were given to her father before he left to return to Earth. Keith declares that that's where they're going. All right, so in addition to the possibility of Earth being attacked by the Galra, they also need to go to Earth to get plans to rebuild the castle ship, Castle of Wands. So that's where we pick up Season 7. How are they going to get home? And what is going on Earth? The entire season pretty much deals with the Galra invading Earth, what Earth does about it, and then the first couple of episodes are how Voltron got to Earth in the first place. So let me say, I think this is the best season of Voltron yet. They get better and better each season. They're so far away from what the initial Voltron from when I was a kid was. That was a Row Beast of the Week show, and they haven't done a Row Beast of the Week in several seasons. Like not since the second season, I think. It's been chapter after chapter of this long epic story. I feel like this is what Lucasfilm wanted Star Wars to be.
I think Lucasfilm, by which I mean George Lucas, just wanted Star Wars to be something, a cash cow for him to fuel his cocaine habit with. But
you know what I mean.
I do, and I really appreciate it. This is a really thoughtful series. It's very clearly planned out. It's very clearly got goals and things it wants to talk about, things it wants to do. It's and very, very well executed, all things considered. I agree with you. This is the best season of it. This is my favorite season. I watched the whole thing, I think in one sitting, basically, and only found a couple of episodes that I kind of went, all right, wait, what? What exactly are we doing here?
Right.
There's one in particular that I'm sure will, because there's always one, right? We've had this discussion. Every season there is one episode that's just a little bit goofy, just a little bit out there.
Yes, we've dubbed it the Voltron Goes to the Mall episode.
I mean, because that was the first one I seem to recall. There's one where they just play Dungeons and Dragons for an episode, which is great.
Yeah,
and they have one of those here, and this is probably the weakest of their just left field, goes to the mall episodes.
Yeah, it's the feud. It's it's got the set design of like the dating game, but it's more you can't do that
the original Family Feud. Like from the before I was born.
Right, but it has like an element of like you can't do that on television to it. It's that's the episode's called The Feud. It's the fourth episode in, and it's they play this Garfle Waffle Snick, and the whole thing is essentially they come up against while they're floating through deep space, trying to get back to the Earth, essentially on impulse power. They run afoul of this intergalactic being named Bob, and Bob says, play the game, and if you do, you win, and I'll set you free, and if you don't, you die. And apparently no one's ever won the game, but of course they do because they are not selfish beings.
Oh, there are other people who have won. I think that's intimated later because Karana actually is loosely aware of this creature. Mm-hmm. And if everyone who encountered it dies, there's no one to tell the stories about it. So I imagine it's just rarely passed.
Right.
Or Bob is specifically referencing this game, and he has different trials that he brings out depending on his mood. Like I imagine he has a version that's just Jeopardy that like no one has ever won. He has this one that this was the first time somebody won. He's got some variant on the $10,000 pyramid that gets beat all the time. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, it's one of those where I don't know if it was definitely like I feel like Netflix said we need 10 episodes, and sorry, we need 13 episodes, and they were like one short. But they had already plotted everything.
The episode does a couple of really fun. Again, most of it's just hokey, bizarre weirdness.
I was gonna say I don't feel like
you kind of roll your eyes at.
I don't feel like
there's a few things that it touches on that are actually kind of cool.
Well, is it the next one where they all start cracking under the pressure of being out in space and snapping on each other?
No, that's the episode after that. The one immediately after this is where they find the ruined planet and the last guys from the Blade of Marmora.
Oh, that's right. Where the one guy turns on them.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I feel like then this episode is really out of place because they should have snapped first. and then gone to do the game, and that's how they reconnect, and and that's the point of the episode. When it's the fourth episode in and they haven't even snapped yet. In fact, they've just had to deal with the life after the Galra have fractured. I'm like, nah, I don't know. I like that.
It makes more sense once you realize that it's not about bonding them. Again, that is the journey within that's meant to do that. This one's more about this really powerful being looking at these creatures that could change the way the galaxy or the universe operates, and just trying to figure out if they're, should I let this happen or not?
It just, other than when they finally make it to Earth, it really just feels like they could have shoved this, the way this episode plays out, and ultimately how it affects the plot. The overall plot arc of the season, I feel like it could have been in any one of the first four. They could have started the season this way. They
really could have started it with this. Yes, they absolutely could.
I'm thinking, Orange is the New Black. This season started with all of the main
terribleness because that show sucks.
My chest hurts. Please don't do this.
All right. I'm sorry.
It starts with all of the main cast in admin confinement cells, and but you don't even realize that in the beginning because the whole first 15 minutes of this is Crazy Eyes having varied hallucinations, and they fortunately they end it early enough to where there's still stuff happening in the first episode. But I remember telling Sean I was deathly afraid that was all that episode was going to be. Like, they could have done the same thing here with the feud, where it just opens up with them, having run afoul of Bob. I have to say, in addition to my issues with the feud, these early episodes, I said this is the best season yet, and that's because the second half, of everything from, The Last Stand on, and maybe even The Journey Within, is so good. All that stuff on Earth is fucking amazing writing, especially for, an animated TV show. But I feel like the first couple of episodes was just kind of, ultimately Voltron's been a very good series. It's been good to great. So when I say this, it's, it's going to sound like I'm putting it down, but, it was just more of the same Voltron stuff. It's still good. It just wasn't spectacular. It gets spectacular from episode 6 on.
I would generally agree with that. There's some good stuff in the first 4 to 5 episodes, but starting at 6, it really takes off.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a decent enough demarcation point anyway. So let's... again, we don't go episode by episode here, but since that's very clearly the point that things start shifting, let's talk a little bit about those first, 4 or 5 episodes, and then move on to the stuff that we really do want to talk about, because that's how this works.
I honestly don't have a whole lot to say about this first couple. They had a puzzle they had to solve. How are we going to get home? And then, so some of it is just the rigors of travel. They're out there in space. I did enjoy how they had to figure out who took what animal and who got to ride with who and all of that.
Well, that was a hilarious bit. And then who was it that came up with it? I think it was Lance. I've got it. We'll do it like this, and it's just the worst possible configuration.
Well, I think he ended up with the girl, is what happened.
Yeah, that Altean that they had with her, whose name I can't remember.
Yeah,
but there's at least 3 others that are just terribly set up, and Pidge was all alone. Pidge literally made out like a band. Was nah, no one's with me. This is the best.
Right, she was playing video games the entire way.
And
home.
They wind up sticking her with the Altean, who's got ADD of some variety, and Karan, who just won't shut up.
Right.
I liked part of the setup. Again, the rigors of travel is great. You and I have both done a lot of road trips, and travel by car, and we know that weird stuff happens when you have those kind of long distance travels. That's a lot of fun and can be really interesting viewing. I think it was when we reviewed The Martian that you said, I actually kind of wanted a segment that was just him dealing with driving across the wasteland of Mars.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've done some trucking, I've done some long haul driving, and and if you don't, if you're trying to just pull through the exhaustion, you end up. I remember one trip with an ex-girlfriend where, in order to keep herself up through the night, she was actually belting out show tunes. And never have I wanted to push somebody out of a car so badly.
Yeah. Relevant to politics. Apparently they are saying that, the Democrats will take the House by a small margin, which, again, expected. We all kind of knew that was coming, and no one really cares.
So the Republicans will keep the Senate, the Democrats will have the House, and nothing will get passed for the next 2 years.
Basically. It's also looking like Gillum can't win Florida at this point.
Aw, what a shame. Oh, well.
It's really close to being mathematically impossible. Anyway.
My father-in-law will be happy. So will my wife.
So the intelligent people in your family. Good to know.
Waka waka.
One of the things that I really liked about the way they started this is, they end the previous season by sacrificing the Castle of Lions, which is their home, or has been for, the entirety of this adventure. And they don't just treat that like it's nothing.
Right. They've lost part of the team.
They've lost part of the team. They've lost the ability to recharge their lions. They've lost, and there's actually some time devoted to that. There is, again, this is part of the cost of war, and they don't just gloss over it. They actually discuss it.
Right.
Which is, one of my major gripes about network television generally is that nothing changes, and when it does, it doesn't really.
The other really nice thing about these early episodes, especially the very first episode, is we get another flashback, and we see the relationship between Keith and Shiro, which
as it develops, yeah. That was great stuff.
Yes, it was. I missed a lot of the details in the way forward. I understand what's happened with the Galra. It's fractured into pirate empires, but outside of that, not all
of it. Well, part of the thing that needs explaining for this is during the last battle with Lotor, when they blew up the castle to stop a cascading effect of essentially black holes from wiping out significant portions of the galaxy, they wound up having a bit of a time jump, which makes sense considering they were exposed to all this intense gravitic forces at bend space-time. So we're actually, I think, 3 years in the future from where we left off, where they think it is versus where it actually is. And the Galra has fractured. Some of it became lawless. Some of it maintained bits of its structure. Hagar seems to have some kind of control, some kind of power base that she's controlling from, because Sendak is still he's still part of the other order. What was it? I want to make a Star Wars joke, but what do they call themselves? The Fire of Purification? Something like that?
Something like that.
So the point being, it's fractured, but it's not completely chaotic. It's just trying to fill a power vacuum. But there are still large segments that are ordered and militaristic.
Anything else about these first couple episodes?
If we're going to pick back up on the journey within, I do want to say that I liked the ruins as an episode. Because, again, this show, more so than a lot of live-action stuff, even live-action stuff aimed at adults, doesn't actually shy away from, again, the cost of war. There's that scene in the ruins where Keith's mother looks and sees all the discarded blades from the other Blades of Marmor who are dead. And there's dozens and dozens of these things. And it means something, and there's a lot more of this when we get to the Earth stuff, which we'll talk about momentarily. But I like that in, and this is in a lot of ways a war drama. Fantasy, a mixture of science fiction and fantasy, but still, at its core. So there's some good stuff. We get to see Cosmo in action in that episode for the first time, I think, and well, for the first real time. There's some other stuff he does in a few other episodes, but dude, the Blink Wolf is awesome. He's one of my favorite things about this show now.
I'll tell you, one of the, we've said this in the past, like, this is really this person's season, this is that person's season. Like, there's always somebody that gets a chance to shine. I felt like this was Hunk's season.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good Hunk stuff in The Journey Within, and then as the next couple of episodes unveil, Hunk talks about not being able to see his family and needing to at least make sure they're okay. And I'll tell you, Hunk was always in the original show, and even to an extent in this one, he's there for a lot of comic relief. Pidge is the Data, the Spock, the science member on the team. She's always the solution focused one. The leader / hero role always seems to flip between Keith and Shiro. You have Lance, who also sometimes has a turn at being comedy relief, but he's also a lot of the soul of the team. And then there was Hunk, who who kind of has that Scooby Shaggy thing going on, where he's sort of the reluctant hero. He'd rather have a sandwich. And I really felt like he stepped out of that role this season, and he was like, nope, he's equal. He's as much a hero as any one member of that team.
Yeah, the stuff. I mean, he's the one who pulls them out of their funk in The Journey Within, which I had a lot of fun with that episode because they get blasted, they get separated from their lions, and they're just fighting off dementia, trying not to. It's a combination of dementia and I'm stuck in a very confined space with the same 5 people. I'm trying not to kill you all, which is like my version of hell. Like, oh look, there's exactly like 5 other people, and you're all stuck together forever. No.
Yeah. Let's all right. So let's flip over to the second half of the season. Here it begins with The Last Stand, parts 1 and 2, where we have Sendak in his imminent attack on Earth, and we have Pidge's dad who comes back with information, and he's running afoul of the admiral of the Galaxy Garrison. And I'll tell you what I loved about this is that there's this tacit acknowledgement that this enemy with superior firepower is coming, and they are woefully unprepared. And it's like, and I thought the debate over how they should handle it was as realistic as it comes. I was like, wow, that was probably what would really happen if somebody came back and was like, yeah, aliens are coming, and they're going to kill us all. I'm like, okay, well, we could share this information, and we could work together, and we could exponentially, the Independence Day thing of, well, after the aliens landed the first time, all the nations of the world got together and created these giant weapons in case they ever came back.
Which still did nothing, so thanks for all that wasted effort. Because bear in mind, Mark and I are like 2 of the 4 people that saw the sequel.
Yes. But the idea was in the right place of, hey, we're all, at this point, racial divide.
The old Benjamin Franklin quote, we will all hang together. If we do not hang together, we will all hang separately.
Right. So racial divides sort of go away, and and it stops being about you're Asian and you're black and you're white, and to we're all human in a galaxy full of non-humans. And so either stand together and protect the Earth or die trying. Or the other thing, and this is the Admiral's point. I keep calling her an Admiral. I don't know what she is, but it is an Admiral. How about that? The Admiral's like, yeah, if you go around saying that there's going to be an imminent alien attack, you're probably going to freak people out. Not to mention that, that military institutions, by and large, tend to be secretive, and don't necessarily want to share information. And so I thought that struggle was very realistic and very, very dramatic the way that it played out. I was enjoying a lot of that. The frustration of, even with great leaps and bounds in technology, they're still so... they have this great big battleship they can't get powered. all of that.
We know how some of this works, but we can't make all of it work, and we're making all these strides, but that we're limited by production means and the technology that we have, and some of this has to be integrated, and it doesn't quite integrate right. And
the other thing I liked is when Sendak finally does attack. I've played enough games of Risk and Civilization or whatever that I love the fact that when they realized that the one base was the only fortified place on the entire planet, they were just like, fuck it, then we just won't attack it. They can't.
Yeah, like we're wasting our time attacking this. There's a whole other planet. Let's do that.
Right.
Let's not be stupid.
Right. They break their attack. They immediately start setting up fortifications all over the rest of the planet. I'm like, yeah, that's Risk, baby. Okay, so
this is what an occupying force does. This is documented throughout history.
Right. Congratulations, you've managed to fortify New Zealand. We'll just take over the rest of the planet. It's fine. I like that. I like the fact that the people, who wrote this recognize this is what would happen if if aliens actually did attack the planet, and we were utterly unprepared for it.
I liked that. I liked the way they made use of the time jump, because that was one of my concerns going into the season is, okay, we're going to go back to Earth. Fine. Good. But you already sent, Pidge's dad back. So if Voltron shows up, 3 weeks later, literally all you're doing is dragging a bunch of vastly superior weaponry onto the target that you don't want them to hit.
Mm-hmm.
They made use of that time jump to get at least part of Earth and its defenses kind of ready for this.
So when Voltron finally does show up, they they realize that Sendek is essentially attacking the Earth in order to bait the Lions into showing up, and then I guess their plan is to overpower Voltron and then take kill the pilots and take the Lions.
Either that, or they have it's mentioned later that they have people rounded up into labor camps.
Mm-hmm.
It's not terribly difficult with some of the characters, because again, Lance and Hunk both have large families that were not part of the military-industrial complex.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's where I'm going with this. I was under the impression that the Voltron weapon could pretty much wipe out the Galra army, if it needed to. And I guess I was wondering why, when they finally got there. I mean, on the one hand, I can see the wisdom and just not wanting to rush headlong into an alien invasion, because you have no idea, are they setting up human shields? You really don't know what you're getting yourself into. So it's like, all right. So in that respect, I could see hiding the Lions away, just so they know what they were dealing with and know where they needed to attack. But once they had a degree of intel, I kept thinking to myself, like, why don't they just call back the Lions and just start attacking the warships? Voltron is a nearly invincible weapon compared to the Galra warships.
I think it was just they were worried about the collateral damage.
Mm-hmm.
Once they got to Earth and went, 3 years, so they're pretty well fortified, and they have humans, they have hundreds and hundreds of people in labor camps, and if we just attack and this goes badly, he's just gonna go, you know what, kill everyone around you.
Yeah.
And we're just gonna do everything we can to obliterate the population. We can't win this fight, but we're gonna go down swinging and taking down as many non-combatants as we can.
Yeah, I guess I get that, and to a degree, they did do what I suggested. Voltron does get in the fight, and they have to, and essentially. And I guess essentially the Galra, realized that having the Earth as part of the Galra Empire was essentially useless. So when they were done doing what they needed with it, they were going to blow it up because it was blocking their view of Venus.
Venus is a better looking planet. In all fairness,
Venus was her name. She's got it. So I got all that. I guess it was just it's. You don't watch The Gifted, and I'm sure you'll have some snarky comment about it being a horseshit program. But
you made it for me, so it's okay.
There's all these scenes of regular humans showing up with guns, finding these mutant hideouts and attacking or whatever. And I keep thinking, you're fucking mutants. Most of you have offensive powers. Take the humans out. Why are you running? But whatever.
Really, Mark, you're asking for Fox for Fox owns those things, right? I say Fox owns has the mutants.
For the next few minutes, yes.
You're asking the people who write Fox programming to be consistent and logical in their writing. Like that they just don't attract that. You don't understand. Even though we're uber powerful and could wipe out a small city, we want these people to be sympathetic, so they're just going to keep running as though because guns. Like, they're afraid of the guns. It's stupid. There's a reason I don't watch it.
So ultimately, we have the Galra Empire who build their planet-destroying weapon, and Voltron eventually takes it out. They eventually also get the ship running. That joins in the fight and evens the odds. And that takes out some of the Galra Empire. I forget how this thing ends. I was really tired when I watched it.
Okay. I can tell you. There's Voltron is struggling to try and stop the planet-cracking weapon from going off, and they're getting kind of abused by it. They eventually do succeed in stopping it. They take out the ships, but they're all damaged, and then out of the sky drops another Voltron-like entity, and a giant, a very large robot, again on par with Voltron in terms of size, that proceeds to just beat the snot out of them. There's not a whole lot of explanation for this thing given, but it is more powerful. It absorbs most of their energy shots. It hits them back harder. They struggle to find anything resembling effective offense. The giant spaceship that had been built on Earth, the Atlas, after it's powered by some of that, what was it? That was my only gripe. All right, bear in mind that my only gripe about some of this was Karan carrying around a chunk of some of the material that they had recovered from the explosions at the end of the previous season, and describing it as a thing of infinite mass.
Right.
Like, if it's a thing of congratulations, if its mass is infinite, it's essentially a black hole. Right. You would not be carrying it. You wouldn't be doing no, not how that works. But it came from the magic alternate dimension, so I'm gonna limit elements of my criticism of that. But something in the way they constructed it, and whatever little bit of whatever magic that was in the plans for the Castle of Lions, combined with the this material that they wind up using as their power source, lets it transform into a giant robot. I mean, huge. This thing's bigger than Voltron. It tries to fight this thing. It gets its butt kicked, but it does buy Voltron enough time to sort of recover, find an opening. They defeat the robot, but it's got a self-destruct mechanism. So they fly it into outer space so it can blow up and not actually kill anyone. We get one of my few gripes with this show is that it seems every season, at the end, in the last episode specifically, they tease that somebody's going to die. And it just, I don't know, it's getting a little tiring. Because it's just every season, we get this emotional moment, and then there's a MacGuffin or a Deus Ex Machina that shows up, and, oh no, so-and-so didn't die.
Pronouns, pal. Who are we talking about here?
Oh, it changes depending on the season.
Well, who are we talking about this season?
No one specifically, but as they're flying the bomb off, and Keith says to them, "It's been an honor to serve with all of you."
Right.
Right before this giant explosion, and then they lead that into the memorial service for all those who fell trying to get Earth out of the grip of the Galra. And it turns out all the Paladins are fine.
Right.
Again, they've done this, they teased it in the previous season with, giant... with all the explosions, because there was something about that one that one of the guys almost didn't make it out. There was the first season when Shiro actually died, we find out. There was one, I can't remember the season, but Keith is prepared to throw himself in front of one of those planet-killing beams to try and buy time for everyone else to get out. There's the one where where Keith fights the clone of Shiro, and they both nearly fall to their death from the orbiting battle station. It seems to kind of just within the last 2 episodes, they try to scare you with somebody dying.
Right.
And you can only fall for the head fake so many times before you realize it's a head fake.
So that does bring us to predictions here. What do season 8, you think everyone makes it that alive?
Probably. I imagine all the main characters will.
I got to imagine that either...
Let me say it like this. It's either all of them or none of them.
I see.
They all go down fighting and are remembered fondly.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like the show kind of has to end with the entire... with Voltron and the Paladins all going down in flames. Like, they're all making the ultimate sacrifice.
Which I would be okay with. Like,
yeah.
You can easily write that.
So it does end with
hang on. Sorry, that does lead me to the last major kind of... Because we always also end the seasons on a cliffhanger.
Right.
There's always something that gets you to come back.
Yeah, that's what I was about to get to.
This season, they've recovered most of the wreckage from the giant robot that Voltron... From the fellow mech that Voltron fought off. And it doesn't have a pilot so much as an Altean battery, like a physical Altean who is the power source for this thing.
Yeah.
And that's our cliffhanger, and
so,
I was fine with it. This is clearly something they've been hinting at with... Lotor was using them as batteries for quite some time. Hagar seems to have found a better way to do it.
Yeah, I got to imagine that season 8 is the is the Voltron coalition along with Earth pressing their advantage against the Galra, and sort of this has got to be a joint effort to crush the Galra into submission, and a side quest to find the lost Alteans. That the Alteans did not all die. Like I can see. I can see Allura saying, there's clearly Alteans out there. They're being used as living batteries. We need to find them all, and and maybe that's how her story ends. She leaves. She gives up being a paladin to go out there with Koron, on a mission to find the rest of the Alteans out there, or to set up a new Altean homeworld. Whatever the case may be. But I would imagine that's season 8 is the last ditch attempt to destroy the Galra in total, and and find whatever Alteans are out there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's gonna be part of it. They're gonna have to figure out what Hagar's up to, and they're gonna have to take her out because she's very clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was glad they took a break from Hagar. And,
I loved that this was a much more intimate season
mm-hmm.
than some of the previous ones. The scope, we're talking, they're fighting to save the entire planet that is Earth, and that's a big deal. But they've also spent the last few seasons, galaxy hopping.
Right. And I feel like they took that as far as they could. I think at this point this has been one giant game of chess. And now finally, all the pieces are where they need to be to get to to get us into the third act, and that's where we are. Season 8, your third act of this, several hours long movie. And now we can finally see the last clash between Voltron and the Galra Empire. So overall, I have high hopes for season 8. Season 8 comes out, I believe, sometime in December. If I remember correctly. Do you have any idea off the top of your head?
Well, it's on the schedule, so...
Yeah, but we're not going to get to it until, January or February. I don't have the date.
How about you just cancel Robin Hood and we talk about it then, assuming that lines up?
Ridiculous.
Please No, seriously. If that lines up, I would rather talk about this than Robin Hood.
Well, tell you what. The 8th and final season will be released on December 14th. December 4th. Oh, it's the same day as Fuller House Season 4. Oh, yeah, I do have it on my calendar. It's right there. Nope, that by that point, we will have already gone past Robin Hood and Creed, so there.
Ah, damn. How about Bumblebee? Can I get out of that one?
Nope.
Aquaman?
Nope.
Dang. There's no luck for me.
No.
All right.
Da, 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 your life sucks. Da, 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 da. So we will get to Voltron Season 8 February 5th. That's when I have it on the calendar.
All right.
All right. In the meantime, as far as other plugs for this week, tomorrow we'll have another TV party.
Is there anything else? Do you have anything else you want to touch on for this?
No, I knew this was going to be a relatively short episode. There was a lot I liked about it. There's very little I didn't like about it, but I didn't really have to get into a deep philosophical discussion about it either.
The only other thing I wanted to touch on, and you mentioned it briefly, that a lot of this season, Hunk gets some of the best moments.
Yes.
There's one scene in particular. Once they get to Earth, he wants to go rescue his family, and he is very vocal about this.
Mm-hmm.
And no one tries to stop him, which is probably for the best. And they're like, no, we've been with you, we've fought with you. This is your blood family, but in a sense, there are you're our family as well. So of course we're going with you. Turns out they can't, because they moved them into a labor camp, and they don't want to risk elements of their other plan to break them out. And I mean, I was gearing up for Hunk doing something really stupid,
right?
Because he's not the stupid character. He very clearly has mechanical genius. That's why that's the primary reason he's there. But when you push the wrong button on an emotional guy, and Hunk is the most emotional of them by and large, it's very easy to write him doing something stupid. And thankfully they didn't. He does back down. He doesn't want to. He's not going to jeopardize their plan to actually save the Earth, but he is still pissed about it. And there's one genuinely heartbreaking scene when he's like, I just want to make sure they're okay. So as they're scouting this labor camp, he sees them through, I think it's binoculars. And this is, he's finally back on the same planet with his family, who he hasn't seen for the entirety of this show, however many years it's been that they've been doing this. And they're right there, and he can't do anything about it. And it's a genuinely kind of heartbreaking moment that, again, just overall speaks to the quality of writing that goes into this show.
All right, while we're at it, there is actually one other thing I wanted to bring up too, and that was, and while I saw it as a possibility and certainly believable, no,
because I told you,
no, the Admiral selling out Voltron.
Oh, that,
and I was like, I've been.
I just hoped you wouldn't. Okay. You lost you lost the decisions. These clearly didn't go your way. I appreciate the logic of, if I just want to save the people of Earth. And because that rationale has been used to justify stupid moves like this. Not just in writing, but documented history.
But here's the thing. I have watched a lot of mob television. And, a lot of television having to do with, large gangs or whatever. If you don't have an army to back you up, if you're a drug dealer and you don't have muscle to protect you, there's nothing to stop people from stealing your drugs and your money. This is a constant thing that happens. And I'm looking at this person, and she has nothing to back her up. She has the whole reason she's bargaining with the Galra is because the humans are so woefully outnumbered and outgunned. So the Galra have no reason to honor any kind of bargain that they've made with her. How does she not know that?
I don't. I imagine it's just desperation. Humanity has basically lost this war at this point. They're occupied. We have one outpost that's slowly just being starved out by siege tactics. I mean, part of it, I imagine the other part of it is, people who live in the real world think that way. You and I can look at that objectively. There is a counterpoint, and that's they've proven they're better than us. They want the lions. It doesn't actually cost them anything to honor their word, so why wouldn't they? Again, this is stupid, and it's not how the world works. But there are people who think this way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it drove it drove me kind of nuts, but it was but it moved the plot forward, so I'll allow it.
And they actually did kind of redeem the Admiral in the end, so
yeah,
I was okay. I just my thing was okay if you're gonna wind up doing this predictable betrayal, don't go mustache twirly, please. Right. Don't go too far. And so the fact that she gives up her life saving the Lions from Sendak.
Right, when she realizes she's made a terrible mistake. It's like, and that's all well and good, but, and I'm with you that it wasn't like suddenly she became enamored of the Gulra Empire. She was like, I see the future, and the future is Gulra, or something along those lines. Like, all right,
there's beauty in the purity of the Gulra Empire that we clearly can't handle. That just humanity needs to embrace.
Yeah, something that stupid. Like, all right, I get it. I'm good with all of that. The fact that they wrote yet another character who is as stupid as the lead gal from Weeds. Come on, can't we be done with this motif, with this one particular failure of character? Listen to the people out there. In order for you to succeed in crime, you have to have loyal muscle, or it doesn't work.
Well, look, this was clearly not someone who had ever seen The Wire, all right? Otherwise she'd know you need an Omar.
Well, no, Omar worked for himself. You need...
Okay, you have to allow for Omar. Because Omar robbed drug dealers. So if you were a drug dealer that didn't have a bunch of muscle, Omar was just going to kill you and take all your stuff.
You needed Slim Charles. You need a lot of Slim Charles. Slim Charles was the muscle. Everything goes back to The Wire.
Well, with you it does.
All right. I think we're done here.
Let me think. I didn't want to get an I Told You So in because I said when we reviewed the previous season that they were going to go forward with Lance and Allure as the romantic item. And you kind of went, no, Allure and Keith. I went, nope, just trust me.
They hinted at it. There's no telling where that's going.
We know where it's going for. I mean, again, look, it's all going down in flames at the end, but
no, they're not ending happy. I'm telling you, if one of them doesn't die, she's going off into space, and he's staying with his family.
That's entirely possible. But the point being, that's the direction they were writing it. I don't know why you didn't pick up on it, but
I got a lot going.
Again, you just wanted to get an I Told You So in.
I got a lot going on in my world. All right, tomorrow on the Radulich Broadcasting Network TV party tonight, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is the Riverdale Greg Berlanti iteration of the Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And then Alexis Hana will be on to discuss that with me. I threw an invitation out there. I said, if there's any girl that wants to do this, and then two girls rose their hand. It was Alexis and Sean. So it'll just be I and Miss Hana. And then Thursday, myself and Jesse will be looking at the new Soulfly album, Ritual. Next week, speaking of Miss Hana, she will be on along with Justin Thomas, myself, and Jesse as we discuss Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. And then
what a stupid... I don't know why Deadpool is still a thing. I really don't.
And then Tuesday, myself and this fellow over here will be discussing the new Grinch. We're mostly going to spend that review talking about how that movie traumatized my son. Because I'll tell you,
so have you seen it? Have you seen it with him already?
No, well, it doesn't come out till this weekend. But
okay. Well, then how do you know it's going to traumatize him?
Because I played "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch" at the dinner table, and he went into hysterics.
You mentioned before that he doesn't like the Grinch, but man, that's going to be funny.
He's swearing he won't go. He's like, it's going to give me nightmares, and he even said last night, like. The worst was I kept playing different iterations. I wouldn't stop. I kept playing different iterations of "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch."
You're just actually torturing your child with Boris Karloff singing.
Yes. At one point, I got to the Misfits. The Misfits did a trio of How the Grinch Stole Christmas songs. One of them is You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. And the actual picture of the Grinch, his eyes are blacked out. Dude, my son nearly shit his pants. Like, the album cover to this Misfits Grinch album scared the fuck out of my kid.
Well, your kid is kind of a wuss.
You know, in some ways he is. In other ways...
I mean, sorry, that's kind of what I meant. Like, because you've told other stories of him being, you know, awesome and kind of a badass for his badasses, you know, what is he, 4?
Yes, 4.
I mean, you know, as badass as a 4-year-old can be, and being willing to wrestle with you, and you know, power bombing him, and him just kind of laughing and wanting more, and then, but the Grinch. You
know, again, you look at the Rankin and Bass, Lord of the Ring, Return of the King, or The Hobbit, and you don't, and you're not afraid. At 42, it still gets to me. Like, I don't like to look at it. You know, I got through.
I understand why you don't want to look at it. It's badly drawn.
It's gross. It's just not appealing to look at. You know, there was actually a Nerdist article recently that talked about the Raggedy Ann and Andy movie, how it was nightmare fuel for a generation of children, which I'd never realized. I thought I was the only wuss that didn't like it, but apparently it scared the fuck out of a lot of kids. So, you know, look, you never know. My wife to this day, and you know, you're closer in age to her than I am, obviously. I think you guys are actually around the same age.
33.
She's 35. And she can't stand to hear Marilyn Manson's voice. Like, if the Beautiful People come on, she'll immediately change channels, lest she have nightmares later that night. Marilyn Manson still affects her that way. Like I laugh at Marilyn Manson. Always have. I always thought, you know, it was kind of a rip-off of Alice Cooper. But, you know, to my wife, he's the boogeyman. You know, there are certain things from the Nightmare on Elm Street movies that still are gross and unappealing to look at. Like, Sean and I were talking about that. You know, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, where they do the puppet thing with the veins. Like, it's so gross, I can't bear to watch it.
He pulls the tendons out of the guy's skin and uses him like a marionette. Yeah, it's great.
So, for those of you that aren't...
Best kill in that whole movie.
So my point is, like, I'm not surprised that my son sort of focused on something and said, okay, this I have decided that this scares me. Because most of the things don't really bother him. Like, he's watched stuff with me, and, you know, it's questionable whether or not I should have had it on in the room when he was there in the first place. But sometimes, like, I'm watching things that I never intended to watch with him in the first place, and he walks in and, oh, God, lobster. And he looks at it and goes, huh. That looks creepy, and then we'll just walk out of the room again. Never says another word about it. But the Grinch stuck with him. I can't tell you why.
Well, hopefully the texturally more fluffy version that's going to come out of this, because this one looks like the Grinch, but it's fluffy. You know,
sure.
It's the animation style, so hopefully this one won't... Let me rephrase. I don't actually care if it scares your kid, because everybody's scared of something. And he's your kid, not mine. I don't have any kids.
Yeah, you don't have to deal with this.
Yet. I do hope to have children one day, but I need a wife first. And that's a whole other thing. Anyway, the point being, I don't actually care that if he gets scared. I care that you will have to take him out, and you will then have like huge gaps in what you actually view of the material that we have to talk about.
My wife will be there. She'll deal with it.
Oh, nice. So you're golden either way then. Okay.
Yeah.
No, the complaint can totally rescinded. Please resume traumatizing your child.
Yeah. No. Look, why else have a child if you're not going to traumatize it?
You know, that's a. I don't know. I have to think about that and get back to you. I'll see if I can come up with a better.
My parents traumatized me, and I will traumatize my child. That is the way of the world.
I mean, look, I've said it before. The only two constants in life are suffering and death. You're going to die, you, me, everybody else, and along the way, you're going to suffer. That's it. Universal.
Suffering makes you stronger. That's the way that works.
Overcoming suffering makes you stronger.
Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
That is profoundly inaccurate.
All right. And as much as I'm enjoying this game, I'm not. All right.
Fair enough.
So we'll be reviewing The Grinch or my son's reaction to it, whichever you like. And then on Wednesday the 14th, we'll be looking at New York Hardcore for Life, Sick of It All, Wake the Sleeping Dragon. Andrew Graham and I will be discussing Our World War as we celebrate Veterans Day a few days late. The following week, Gavin will be on the Source Material podcast. We'll be discussing the Justice League America, The Tornado's Path. We'll be back again for Damn You Hollywood, Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald. The night before Thanksgiving is always our turkey show on the Metal Hammer of Doom. This year's turkey is Hoobastank, Push Pull. And then on Thanksgiving Day will be a Metal
I always forget that Hoobastank was actually a thing, but I was in high school at the time and heard their one song played rather incessantly on the radio.
Apparently they've had quite a few songs.
Sure, but I've only heard one.
On Thanksgiving, Robert Cooper and Jesse Starcher will be reviewing the new Throssenblatt. That's an actual name of a band. That isn't a word I just made up. And then finally, we close out November with Robin Hood Week. We start with Hawkeye, My Life is a Weapon. Damn You Hollywood, the new shitty Robin Hood movie that's coming out. POD Circles. By the way, we started to refer to the singer of POD as Dread Hart because he looks like Bret Hart. Get it? But he has dreads. Do you get it? Dread Hart.
I mean, you're talking about POD. There's nothing good about that.
Boom. Here come the boom. Ready or not. Here come the boys from the
I'm familiar with some of their work. I'm not just saying that to say it.
Booyaka, booyaka. And then we close out Robin Hood Week with an on-trial for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And on December 1st, myself and Pat Mullen will be doing live commentary over the first heavyweight boxing fight on pay-per-view in like a million years. Deontay Wilder versus Fat Tyson Fury.
That's not true at all.
No, I've heard that like it's been like several years since there was a heavyweight pay-per-view.
I don't think that's true. I mean,
No.
Joshua and Klitschko fought earlier this year.
But that wasn't on pay-per-view.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
No.
It was in the UK. You could only watch it on pay-per-view if you were here. It just wasn't promoted by a domestic.
I read
American
somewhere
pay-per-view
that Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury is like the first one since like I think Mike Tyson and what's his face. I'm
You're
gonna look
have
this.
to be way more specific.
He bit his ear. Evander Holyfield.
No, because Tyson and Lewis was on. Was that a title fight when Tyson fought Lennox Lewis?
I don't know, but I'm gonna go ahead and look this up, and I will send it to you off air.
All right. Speaking of heavyweights, last Saturday I covered UFC 230 when Daniel Cormier defeated Derek Lewis in the most predictable way possible via second-round submission.
Which is why I didn't bother watching the pay-per-view.
Oh, you should have, because Daniel Cormier, despite being like 4 inches shorter and 20 pounds lighter, just absolutely controlling Derek Lewis on the mat was great.
Meh.
So good for Daniel Cormier. He actually made history with this fight. He became the first person in UFC history to defend titles in 2 different weight classes. So good for him. Because every other person who had won belts in multiple weight classes in the UFC had not defended successfully at least one of them. So good for him. We reviewed that entire card, the great fight between Jacare and Chris Weidman, which, Mark, if you're going to look up a fight from this card, look up that and look up Israel Adesanya's smoking Derek Brunson, because those were both great. We also previewed UFC Fight Night 139, which is the UFC's 25th anniversary show, and it's not a good card. Look, the main event is Chan Sung Jung and Yair Rodriguez. It's not which I don't want that in the main event. I want the co-main event to be the main event, because the co-main event is Donald Cerrone and Mike Perry, and someone's going to die. The rest of that card is really meh. But we preview that. We also talk about major news in the MMA week. We finally got Jeff back for this show. He had some technical glitch interaction between Skype and his computer that kept him off last week. He was back this week, so for those of you who are like Jeff, you can hear him and I talk MMA again. This coming Saturday, I'll be covering Fight Night 139 and trying not to drink because it's against my religion and personal belief systems. But boy, does this card not look good. And then on Sunday, we will review that event and preview UFC Fight Night 140 when the UFC debuts in Argentina. They're in Buenos Aires for Neil Magny versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. So you can get a full preview of that card this coming Sunday on the 411 Ground and Pound radio show. I think that's it for me, apart from everything Mark mentioned. He's just trying. Look, I occasionally provide updates on how dead I am inside. I'm up to 31.5%. It's mostly the movies Mark makes me review.
You're such a whiner.
Yes, and I'm not going to stop. But I think that's it for me, so.
I read somewhere that this was like a historic fight because it was like a heavyweight return to pay-per-view in like years. And now I can't find the article that I was reading. God damn it. All right. You know what? I'm once again distracted by nonsense. So with that said, thank you for tuning into this show. Well, like I said, we'll be back in February to finish off Voltron and move on to other subjects, other TV shows covered by Netflix. So until then, thank you for joining us here on TV Party tonight. Be well, be safe, and behave.